Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well today. Welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. This video is Lesson 86, and we're going to cover pages 106 and 107 in our book today. The song, The Ballad of Gilligan's Isle. So welcome back. It's so good to have you with me once again for another lesson video. We've only got two more pieces left in our lesson 1 book, so that's pretty exciting. This piece is from the famous TV show Gilligan's Isle, so it goes way back. The copyright is 1964, 1966, so some of you may not be familiar with it, but others of you might be. I never watched it, but it certainly was popular enough, and the song was popular enough that I've heard it a few times throughout my life. But I think it's a fun piece. It's definitely a very different style than our previous couple of lessons. In fact, our previous lesson was a Christmas piece, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Very different style today. So you can see underneath the title at the top of page 106, it says moderately fast, and that it is. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you that like with most pieces, well, with all pieces, if you've got a fast piece or a moderately fast piece, it's going to take longer to learn. I mean, it's just logical because it's just harder to play faster. You've got more to process and remember in a less amount of time. But I often say, as long as you learn the piece well, learn some of the techniques and things, which we'll talk about today, unless you really love the piece or you're going to perform the piece, I don't feel like you have to learn it up to speed. It's kind of optional. Now, of course, if you are going to perform it, for someone who, maybe someone who loves this show and grew up with it, they're probably not going to want to hear a true ballad. You know what I'm saying? No pun intended. They want to hear the fast version. So you got to keep that in mind. But if you don't really enjoy the piece, not your favorite, if you don't know anyone you're going to play it for, learn the techniques, learn the skills, apply it to future pieces that you do like, and we'll move on. And that being said, there's only one more piece in our book, and that is the Chattanooga Choo Choo over on page 108. That piece is actually 4 pages long. So I'm going to give you a heads up that a lot of these videos now have been taken over an hour because these are just big detailed pieces. I'm going to split that video, our last lesson, into 2 separate videos. So I just want to give you the heads up about that. And then we'll be on to level 2 shortly after that. So thanks for sticking around, and I hope you've been enjoying it. Thank you guys so much for all the comments and the questions. Keep it coming. I love it. I try to respond to everyone as soon as possible on anything and everything that you post. So let's dig on in. And like most of our pieces, the melody is in the right hand. So we're going to start with the right hand first. When you look at the rhythm throughout the piece, so it is in 4/4 time, by the way. That's what the C is. The C stands for common time there at the beginning of the piece in the staff. That means 4 beats per measure, which is the most common of time signatures. But if you look through the piece, there's actually very few eighth notes. Now, you've had, at this point, a lot of experience with eighth notes. And I've done a really detailed job every lesson saying, if you've got eighth notes, we need to be counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I want to start breaking away from that a little bit more if possible. And this is a good piece for that because there are just so few eighth notes involved in this piece. And I'll get to that a little bit more when we dig into rhythms. But what that means is, for the most part, I'd like to count this piece just 1, 2, 3, 4. Just because there's so many quarter notes and half notes. It's a very tedious. It'll get the job done right, but it's just so tedious at that point to break everything down to ands. And like I said, you have enough experience with eighth notes at this point that you should be able to fill them in, fit it in the allotted time space. To simply put, eighth note is twice as fast as a quarter note. So again, we'll get to that when we dig into the rhythms a little bit later, but I want to go ahead and throw that out there. I also want to throw out that, speaking of 4 beats per measure, look at your very first measure. The very first measure is a pickup measure. Now, this is very interesting. This may be the first time we've encountered this, and it won't be the last. This becomes all too common in music. We learned that when you have an incomplete measure, or pickup, as I call it, whatever the difference is, in other words, there's one quarter note, so that's beat 4. So the other 3 beats need to be located in the very last measure of the whole piece, and it should be a 3-beat measure. So that's why it's called incomplete measure. The last measure of the piece is 3 beats, and then the rest of the measure, which is beat 4, can be found at the very beginning. But if you go to the very end of the piece, at the bottom of page 107, look at the last measure. It's got 4 beats. They put rests in, and there's a rest on beat 4. And you might be saying, well, that rest is what you're playing at the beginning of the song, but it doesn't work that way. Just don't write in a rest. And they didn't need to write in a rest. But I'm bringing this up because this is actually really common. So that rule that we learned, while true, it sort of just got pushed aside over the years. And I don't think it really matters either. So the end of the song is in fact 4 beats. So the very first measure of the song on page 106 is a pickup note. And I won't even really call it an incomplete measure at this point because, I mean, it is incomplete, but when you say incomplete, that means there's another portion somewhere to be found, right? And it's not. So I'm over-explaining it a little bit, but just in case you were wondering, yeah, this rule sort of gets pushed aside, and that'll sort of be the case more often than not. So what's happening at the very beginning is you're simply coming in on one quarter note, which is going to be beat 4, and it acts like a pickup, and it's all by itself in the right hand. So that is your 5th finger on A, the A above middle C. And we go to the first full measure, the next measure. You've got your thumb on D, and we're going back to 2 more A's. And actually, we got 2 more A's after that, which are 8th notes. So even though we're not getting into rhythm just yet, go ahead and start playing those 8th notes faster than your quarter notes. So we'll get to the counting a little bit more later. So let's go to the next measure. You're going down to 4 on G, skipping down to 2 on E, and then you've got 2 middle C's with your thumb. Now you're going to bring that 2nd finger over to D in the last measure. They don't tell us to do that. Well, you could bring your thumb over, actually. I'll tell you what. Yeah, let's bring our thumb over. Bring your thumb over to D. You might even need to mark that to remember. So your thumb's on middle C. You're going to bring it over to D. And then we've got 2 more 8th note A's with the 5th finger, followed by 2 quarter note A's. And then on the second line, you've got E and G with 2 and 4. Now this is why, ultimately why you want to have your thumb on D on that last measure on the top line. So again, if I had my 2 on D, well, it wouldn't really matter. I could still end up with 2 and 4. No, I like bringing the thumb over, so let's bring that thumb over. Tell you what, I'm actually, sorry guys, I'm actually going to change that again. I'm actually going to go to 2 on D. Here's why. Now I'm being really picky, but if you look at the slur, so go to the 2nd full measure, the very last note, that begins a new phrase, right? A new slur on that middle C. So C is in that slur, and then the D is in that slur. So if I go from thumb to thumb, that's not really smooth, right? Now, it's not a huge deal, and yes, you could do it and be fine. Now, keep in mind, there's almost no pedal in this song. There's no pedal in this spot, so the pedal is not going to cover for you. So if you want to be as smooth as possible, you've got to go thumb on C to 2 on D. So I'm going to change it back, and I apologize once again. Thumb on C. Let's go to 2 on D. And it's actually not going to be hard to go to the 2 and the 4 on the E and G. So you've got your A's. And once you hit your A's, your 2nd finger is just naturally going to pull over. So when you get to the beginning of the 2nd line, you should be right there. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do thumbs on those two C's at the end of the second measure in the first line, and then just go right to your second finger on D, fives on the A's, and then pull over, if you're not pulled over already, to 2 and 4 on E and G. That E and G is our first half note. So we've got a rest on beat 3. Beat 4, we've got E again. And then next measure, we got thumb on D. And now this is interesting. We've got 3 A's with different fingers each time. 5, 4, 3. Now there's a couple of reasons for that. Probably the more realistic reason, although it seems like a lot of work to do, is to get your second finger to G for the next measure. Why do you need your second finger on G in the next measure? Well, because the next note after the G is C. So if I've got 2 on G, I can easily get the pinky on C. So that's probably one of the bigger reasons. Now, the other reason is we're playing a bunch of A's. When you play the same key over and over again, and you're trying to make it smooth, because see, this is under another slur, and truthfully, it's not going to be perfectly smooth. Doesn't matter how fancy we get the fingering. If you hit the same note again and again, it's really hard without pedal to play smooth. And no, we're not going to use pedal here because not only are they not asking for it, but the pedal is going to keep us from performing the appropriate style for this piece. So the 5, 4, 3 is a method to keep it smoother. And you sort of stroke the keys like this. So rather than coming onto the key like that, see, that's a very percussive move. I'm just hitting, tapping. But if I'm sliding and switching fingers, it doesn't make a huge difference, to be honest, but it does a little bit. It does a little bit. So I still think the bigger reason is it's going to help us get to 2 on G, but it's going to give you a little bit softer touch and not make it, So your other approach is if you just stayed on 5, I could try to stroke the key with 5, but it's still not going to be, there's a little bit of a softness to it. Probably because I'm switching fingers and I'm not able to dig into the key quite as much. I could dissect it all day long. So a lot of you might say, you know what, let me just do it with 5. And to tell you the truth, if you want to do it with 5, that's fine. And you still got to squeeze the 2 over to G. Okay? And that's possible. But this actually whoops, I went too far. The 5, 4, 3 just gets that 2 over to G much easier. So you're kind of having to squeeze the 2 over anyways, right? So why not do it this way? You can gradually squeeze it over. So you see, in the end, it's probably better to do it this way. Not just because they have it written and that's what we're supposed to do, but it just makes more sense in the end. So it's not, like I said, it's not the perfect fingering to make this magically come to life with the smoothest you can play, but it helps get that second finger over as well. So I'm going to honor it, and I would recommend you do too, just to get good practice, because we don't see that too often, and there are going to be times later on, different techniques with harder pieces that you're going to want to learn how to switch fingers on a single note, on the same note. So your thumb's on D, we got 5, 4, 3. So remember that little sliding motion. You don't just want to switch the fingers. If you slide, it gives it a softer touch. So on the third measure, 2 on G, 5 on C, again on C, back to 2 on G. And everything we've been playing is quarter notes, by the way. Last measure, we got our thumb on F. Now we've got F again, but we've got to switch to the third finger. And when that happens, that means we need these fingers for notes that are coming up. And sure enough, 2 on E, thumb down the middle C, and then the third line first ending there, end it with the 2 on D. Then you've got a quarter rest, and then you're back to 5 on A, and it repeats back up to the top line. Now, when you go to the top line, go to where those repeat signs are with the dots facing to the right. the first full measure. Don't play the pickup note. Don't play that A again. That A you're actually playing already right here at the end of the first ending there on the third line. So you're going back to the beginning. We got thumb on D, 5 on A, 5 on A, our eighth notes. And the next measure, G, E, C, C. Bring that 2 to D. Then we got eighth notes, and then quarter notes, and then E and G, 2 and 4, quarter rest, E, next measure, D. We're going to slide our fingers, 4, 3, next measure, 2 on G, 5 on C, C again, back to 2 on G, last measure, thumb on F, cross to 3 on F, 2 on E, thumb on C, and then you're going to end again with 2 on D, but go to the second ending, the second measure, because this is the second time you're playing it through. Then you got a quarter rest, and then D again. Next measure, fourth finger on F, and then E, thumb on middle C, last measure, 2 on D, quarter rest, our last note on that line, middle C, the bottom line. This is actually like the top of the page, so I would do 2 on D, and then 5 on A, 5 on A again, and then 2 more eighth notes. Next measure, 4 on G, 2 on E, thumb on C, thumb on C, next measure, 2 on D, 5 on A. You got 3 A's here, and then the last measure, E and G, once again with 2 and 4. Quarter rest, middle C, top of the page, 107, first measure, 2 on D, 5 on A. Now our next A is tied for 4 counts. 3, 4, 1, 2, rest on beat 3, and then we've got our third finger on F, and then the third measure, E and G, once again, 2 and 4, just a quarter note here, and then thumb on middle C, and then the same tie again on this C, 3, 4, 1, 2, rest on 3, the last note of that line, C again, going down to the second line, 2 on D, 5 on A, same tie again, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then 4 on G, 3 on F, and then we have a long tie, our E and G, once again, a lot of E and G's in this piece, with the same fingering, 2 and 4. That is tied for 6 counts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rest on beat 3. The last note of the second line is 2 on E. Third line, thumb on D for a half note. So on beat 3, we're up to A. Now this tie is a little different. This one's on beat 4. So we got fourth finger on G on beat 4, 1, 2, rest. And then we have these 2 eighth notes that just pop in. 2 E's. Third measure, D with our thumb, again, up to 5 on A. Last measure. So don't go to 4 on G, but actually bring the 2 up to G, another G, and then you're up to 5 on C. Go down to the bottom line. Our last line of the piece. You got a quarter rest on beat 1. Use that to hop your fourth finger over to D. Now, you're going to have to hit it strong. It's forte here. For me to do it, I gotta bend that finger. I can't just hop over and hit it flat. If I bend it, I got more power. So keep that in mind. So 4 on the D, that's beats 2, 3, again on beat 4. And then our second measure, we got 5 on E. Probably the same thing, bend your pinky as well. If it's flat, not much power. Or you can use shift the weight in your hand, and you can get a little more oomph if you've used the weight of your hand with that pinky. So that's 2 E's on beats 1, 2, and then you're down to C. 3 and 4, I would use my third finger. Third measure, D. That's a whole note for the entire measure. And then the last measure, you're resting on beats 1, 2, and then you have an F and D with your thumb and fifth finger. It is a staccato accent. So real loud, real sharp, and real short. That's all you got to do. Pretty much no counting there. Just when you get to beat 3, 1, 2, 3. Just hit it on 3 and then you're done. And the left hand will do the same thing. So both hands are real sharp, real short right there at the very end. Okay, so after going through the right hand, it's actually not as complicated as some of our other pieces. There's not that many eighth notes. There's not... Well, I was about to say there's not any syncopation. There's one spot on the third line on page 107. We'll get to that more in a little bit, which at a slower tempo, it's not too hard. Right hand alone is not too hard. But when we get the hands together, that third line in page 107 just sort of comes out of nowhere. And I'm talking about the second measure. And I even wrote the counting in my book because it threw me off a time or two. And I haven't compared this piece, but a lot of these arrangements sometimes aren't exactly like the originals. So it could be that, I've heard it one way and it's different, or it's just hard in general. But keep that in mind when you're playing this piece, or any piece. You say, you know what, that doesn't sound exactly like the original. Usually these are simplified so that, it's more obtainable. A lot of times if a piece of music is written exactly like the original, it'd be ridiculously difficult to read all the nuances and rhythms and things. So they kind of have to find a way to simplify it sometimes so it's easier for us to read. Before, of course, you learn more complicated rhythms, which you will in level 2 and in level 3. So let's go down to the left hand now at the beginning of the piece. So remember, at the very beginning, the right hand is the only hand that plays the pickup note. So our first full measure on page 106, you've got your 4 starting on this D below middle C. So that's just 2 counts, and then on beat 3, you've got F and A with 1 and 2, and then you're going to rest. Next measure, 5 on C, and then you've got E and G, you're going to rest. And there's a little pattern that's happening here, because look at measure 3. It's back to the D, and then the F and A, rest. And then the second line, we're down to C, E, and G. See what's happening here? Second line, second measure, D, F, and A. Third measure, C, C, and G. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first 6 measures of this piece. You've got this pattern. So this pattern is essentially 2 chords. Here's your first chord. Actually, I'm going to do it with the fingering that they provide. This is called the D minor chord. I think we had this. I may be mistaken. But just in case, for my sake, and in case anyone forgot, a D minor chord, I won't get into the details of why it is a D minor chord. But a D minor chord is D, F, and A. All white keys. So that's what you're playing in the first measure. You're playing a broken D minor chord. So you're playing the root note, the D, for 2 counts. And on beat 3, you're playing the other 2 notes. And then you have your rest. The second measure is the C major chord. Now this one we all know. C, E, and G. And it's the same format. You're playing C, the root note, for 2 counts, and then E and G on beat 3. And then you're just going back and forth. So essentially, if you do this outline, 4, make sure it's 4, 2 and 1 for D minor, and then this fingering for C major. This is your outline right here for the first 6 measures of the song. And actually 7, because the last measure of the second line is a C block chord, meaning you're playing all the notes at the same time. So this is your outline. So get used to that. You might even practice it like I'm doing. Because if you can get that memorized, then all the focus is on the right hand, the melody. And that's the part we need to have the focus on anyways. So here's your pattern. You see how it just goes back and forth? Now I'm playing it pretty fast right now, because when I put that right hand with it, it's going to be flying. So You know, that's okay, but I'm saying that because I want you to not get in the habit of always playing it that fast, because when we get the right hand going, it's going to slow down quite a bit, especially when first learning it. So again, with the count, it would just be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So keep your fingers close to the keys, because really the only finger that's moving is your thumb. Your thumb is going from A to G. But otherwise, that's it. Because when I go to the D minor, my 4 is on the D, my 2 is on the F. I just need to move my thumb. Likewise, when I go back to C, my 5's here on C, my 3's on the E. I just move my thumb. So keep the fingers close to the keys. So that gets you through the first 2 lines already. And you're actually going to see these chords a lot in the piece. This is probably most of the left hand, actually. These chords, broken in different ways. So at the end of the second line, you're actually resting on beats 1, 2, and then you come in on 3, 4. Now, when you go to the third line, essentially, they don't have the fingering there, but essentially you're going to D minor. Here's the D minor chord. Let's look at that third line, that first ending. So you rest on beat 1, but what's on beat 2? The A. What's on beat 3? The D. And where am I going when I repeat back to the beginning? The D, right? And then the F and the A. So you're not playing the F, but you want to go to this outline. So I'm coming off the C chord at the end of the second line. Third line, I rest, and then I've got A, and then D. Stay right there, because when you repeat after the rest on beat 4, you got 4 on D, and then F and A. And then you go through your pattern again, because you're repeating. So you do that all the way through the end of the second line. This is the second time through the song. So the third ending, you go to the third line, you go to the second ending. You have a rest on beat 1. Don't go anywhere off that C chord, because you have it again on beat 2. And then on beat 3, there's the D minor chord. And I don't see why we can't stick with that same fingering. Now it gets a little tricky, though, because you rest on beat 4. Now on the third measure, I think this is the only time in the song you have this chord. This is a B flat chord. And surprisingly enough, I didn't even mention our key signature, 1 flat. 1 flat is B flat. And we are in the key of D minor, because the last note in the song ends on a D, a low D in the left hand. So this is our first, and I think only B flat in the entire piece. We never had one in the right hand. This is the only one it looks like we're going to have in the left hand. So that will sneak up on you. So if you want to write a flat sign in next to that bottom note, that B, go ahead and do it. I don't blame you for doing that, because that just sneaks up out of nowhere. So when you do this B flat chord, I would simply do 5, 3, and 1. 5 on the B flat, 3 on D, 1 on F, which is a pretty typical fingering of a chord when you play the chord, by itself. But since it's all by itself in this piece, do that. I would jump to that same fingering on the C chord, which is next on beats 3 and 4. And the last measure of that line, you have the D minor. There I would do our typical 4, 2, 1. Okay, I would do that there. I think throughout this piece, you could just go ahead and do 4, 2, and 1 always. Let's assume that for now and just do that. No, I see one spot they're changing that on us. I'm not sure why. We'll get there in just a second. Okay, so the end of the third line, page 106, beats 1 and 2. You got the D minor, beat 3. You got a low D, so you got to jump. Essentially an octave down. Here's a D, the bottom of that chord, you got to jump to that D. Now notice this is one of the very few spots in the piece where there's pedaling. I'm not even going to do the pedal today because there's just very little pedal. And at this point, you should be very familiar with the pedal. But all it is you're on the B flat chord, the pedal goes down. When you go to the C chord, now notice I moved to it, but I didn't lift my pedal yet. Because remember the rule, you pedal when you go down on the next set of notes. That's when you release the pedal. So So you're going to pedal on the C chord, and then you're going to pedal on the D minor chord, and you're going to hold it to here. So essentially that jump, the reason you're holding the pedal is so we can still hear the chord. You can be jumping, and then when you hit that D, you're off the pedal. And that's it. No more pedal until page 107. Now, you just finished down here. You've got one beat of rest to get back to basically this chord, the D minor chord. Because look at the bottom line. Here's our pattern again. Like the beginning. 4 on D, and then the F and the A. Next measure. C, E, and G. 4 on D, F and the A. Got it? So that bottom line is essentially a repeat of the beginning. Now here's what's interesting. Top of page 107. They specifically wrote 5, 3, and 1 for the D minor chord. I will assume that the reason they did that is so that the next measure, this D, A, A, can be fairly easily played. But then, you go down to the C chord. So, I just said, all the D minor chords we could stick with 4, 2, and 1. My guess is, I don't find it to be a problem, and I have small hands. But my guess is that on measure 2, they're assuming that people aren't going to be comfortable playing 4 on D and thumb on A. I still don't get that. You've been doing this outline the whole piece, but I can't figure it out otherwise. So I'm going to go to 4, 2, and 1 at the top of page 107. I'm not going to do that 5, 3, and 1 that they suggest. Now, you can do it. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with it. You can do it. And then just move down to the C chord. It's fine. But for consistency, I'm just going to say, let's go ahead and stick with the 4, 2, and 1. Why not? So that is a whole note in the second measure. You just play the D and then the A twice. Rest on beat 4, and then you're down. Next measure. The C chord. It's a whole note, so the whole measure, 4 counts. And then the last measure, it's the same pattern you just did with the D minor. C, G, G. Now, when you go to the second line, you're right there at D minor again, the block chord. Dotted half note, 3 counts. I would just do the 4, 2, 1. You're going to hit the chord again on beat 4. And then the next measure, you're going to hit it again. Hold that for 4 counts. When you get to the third measure, it's like going to the C chord. However, you're not playing the E. We're playing what's called a C open chord. C and G for 2 counts, and then G on beats 3 and 4, and then the last measure you go down to C for 2 counts. This is the other spot where there's pedaling. It's pretty easy. You've only got pedal on the third measure, so at the very beginning of the line, you play the D minor chord, you go down with the pedal, you're playing it on beat 4. Next measure, you're still holding the pedal, but we're changing chords, so it makes sense to pedal here. So when you go into measure 3, hit your C and G, off with your foot, back down, and then you hit the 2 Gs, and then hold the pedal through beats 1 and 2, 1, 2, and then you're off. And when you're off, notice you're resting in both hands on beat 3. So that is a big moment of silence, which we'll get to when we put the hands together in just a moment. Now your right hand doesn't come in again until the third line. So you just finished with that C, but on the third line, going back to D minor. Now, unlike the second line had D minor for 3 counts, and then it played it again on beat 4. Here, you've got 1, 2, 3. You switch to C. It's different, okay? It looks the same, but if you look closely, different notes. That's the C chord. Measure 2, you rest on beat 1, C on beat 2, G on beat 3, rest on beat 4. Third measure, D minor chord for the whole measure. Last measure, C major chord for the whole measure. You're going to repeat that sequence on the bottom of page 107, bottom line. D minor for the whole measure, C major for the whole measure, and then on measure 3, you rest for 1, 2, and then you're down here, big jump. So you got to practice that jump. You do have 2 beats of rest to be moving. You got your thumb on A. A's on beat 3, 4, and then that should comfortably put, you're essentially aiming for D minor once again is what's happening. That's really what you're doing. So you've got A on beats 3, 4, and then you have your 5th finger on D. That is a staccato accent, so real sharp and short, and you have to really curve that pinky finger. Use the weight of your hand. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Now, you might be tempted to play it with your 3rd finger or 2nd finger, but then you have to readjust for that on beat 3. You could. You have the rest, right? You could. But I say, leave your hand there. Use the opportunity to work on and strengthen that pinky. Because trust me, you're going to need strong pinkies in both hands for playing the piano. That's just a necessity. So instead of avoiding it, use the opportunity to really work that out. So, and that's on beats 1, 2, and then 3, you're off. So the left hand, when you look at it from a chord point of view, which most of these songs in our book have been, but this one, especially compared to the last couple pieces we've done, this is not too hard. It's basically 2 chords, the D minor and the C major. That's pretty much the entire piece. The only other thing we saw was this B flat chord. But all the other notes, whether it's a block chord, broken, or single notes, they're all some variation of C major, D minor. So if you know this outline with this fingering, you've outlined 90%, 95% of the notes you play in this piece with your left hand. But like with most pieces, it's when the hands come together that's the hard part. So like I often say, and I'll say it again, when you put the hands together, a lot of people, and a lot of my teachers would say, that's when you start counting and you start going slow. Don't mess up your rhythms. All of that is great. Nothing wrong with that. That's fine. In my experience of teaching, especially adults, that's a lot to ask, to be honest, to do. I mean, you're suddenly putting all these things together at once. And one of the hardest things, I think, as adults is we have a harder time with coordination. So this is nothing new. I've said this in many of my past lessons, but I just want to reiterate that today, that I want to go through it and point out when the hands are playing together and when one hand's playing and the other hand is not. Being aware of the rhythms, yes, but not thinking about the rhythms so much in the counting yet. Just going through and knowing when the hands play together and when they're apart. And that's a way to break it down if you're feeling overwhelmed, trying to put together too much too soon. Not to mention just doing a measure at a time. Now, I go through the whole entire piece, right? But you can pause the video and just work on one measure 5, 10 times in a row, which is actually really, really good practice. It's boring as heck, but I tell you, it works. It really works. And that's probably the difference between great pianists and an okay pianist is they put forth the tedious work. Right? So keep that in mind. All right, so at the very beginning, this is our hand position. Remember, your left hand's going to start that D minor, 4 on D, 2 on F, thumb on A. Your right hand really is on D minor as well. I just realized. 5 on A, you're going down to a D. You're essentially outlining D minor there as well. The only difference is you've got the 5 fingers on these 5 notes. Here you've got this sort of extended little stretch position, which is fine. But essentially, yeah, same notation, same outline. So got 5 on AA, and then the Ds are together. So that's our first hit where both hands play. Now, keep in mind when the left hand holds and when it rests. This is where it gets tricky. The left hand was easy. What gets hard or what gets sloppy is when we release too soon. Like if I did this on beat 2, I'm not supposed to release that. I'm supposed to keep it down, right? And then here's beat 3. Or if I did this on beat 4, what did I do? I ignored the rest in the left hand. That's very, 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 very common. And I've done it myself. A lot of us do it, don't even realize it. But rests are as important as notes. It helps dictate the style of this piece. And for this piece to work, especially if you want to get it moderately fast, you've got to have the rests. So once again, 5 on A, D's are together. You're up on A on beat 2. Beat 3, both hands play. And then the 8th notes are by themselves in the right hand. The next measure, we've got C and G, and then E in the right hand, and then both hands come in on beat 3. Beat 4, it's just the right hand. Now remember, we went to the second finger on D here in the last measure, so you're back on D's again in both hands. Immediately, you've got 2 eighth notes. And then you got both hands on beat 3. Just the right hand on beat 4. And then the second line, be ready for it, all 3 notes. Now this might help you, but if you look at and analyze these 3 notes, C, E, and G, you're playing a C chord. Instead of playing it here, you're taking the C and putting it in your left hand. And guess what? You're coming in on beat 3. The E and G in the left hand. The same 2 notes you just played in the right hand, right? Down an octave. So remember, hands together on beats 1, 2, left hand on 3, right hand on 4. So this is a true back and forth. You got hands together, and then it's only the left hand, only the right hand, and then back to D's on the next measure, up to A. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because if you're switching the fingers, you're going to switch to 4 on beat 3 when the left hand comes in. And then you switch to 3 and the left hand drops out. So that's a little tricky spot there. And then the third measure, C and G. You go up to C on beat 2, and then the hands together on beat 3. Just the right hand on beat 4. Now you stay resting in the left hand for this last measure. You got the thumb on the F in the right hand, 3 on the F, and then the hands together on beat 3. Down to C on beat 4. And then when you get to the first ending on the third line, it's just the right hand on beat 1. Keep holding it. The left hand enters on beat 2. And then the right hand drops out here on beat 3. And then it switches. Now the right hand plays and the left hand drops out. And then you go back to the beginning, the first full measure. So the D's are together, hands together, right hand 8th notes. Next measure, together on beat 3. Drop out the left hand on beat 4. Move your second finger to D, next measure. Hands together, 8th notes. Together on beat 3. Right hand by itself, and then all together on the next line for 2 counts. Left hand on beat 3. Right hand on beat 4. Make sure the left hand came off. And then together on the next measure. Together on beat 3, switch your right hand fingers. Right hand by itself, and then together in the next measure. Together on beat 3. Left hand drops out on beat 4. Just the right hand now on beats 1 and 2. Together on 3. 4. Go down to the second ending, and it's just the right hand. Keep it down as you come in on beat 2 in the left hand. And now the chord on beat 3 in the left hand's all by itself. Beat 4, the right hand's by itself. And then you jump down with your left hand to the B flat chord. Both hands come in on beats 1, 2, both hands on 3, right hand on 4. Both hands on the last measure, 1, 2, And then when you go down to this D, pop off your right hand. But don't go far, because then the right hand plays on beat 4, and then your left hand pops off, and it's going to come back up. 4 on D, 2 on D, together on beat 1 on the bottom. Together on beat 3. And this is like the beginning, more or less. So those eighth notes are by themselves, together on the second measure. Together on beat 3. Take your left hand off on beat 4. Next measure, together. Together on beat 3. Left hand off again on beat 4. Last measure, hands together. Now beats 3 and 4, it's left hand on beat 3. Only the right hand on beat 4. Top of the page, 107, together on beat 1. Now you're going to hold this left hand. 3, 4. Now on beat 1, you're going to hold the right hand, play the left hand. 1, 2. Beat 3, you're going to take your right hand off. Beat 4, you're going to take your left hand off. And then both hands on the third measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep holding the right hand. Left hand enters on beat 1, 2. Off in the right hand on beat 3. Off in the left hand on beat 4. Next line. Both hands enter. 1, 2, 3. On beat 4, keep holding the right hand. Play the left hand on beat 4 and again on 1, 2. Now the right hand enters. Keep holding your left hand. 3, 4. The next measure, both hands. 1, 2. Keep holding your right hand. 3, 4, 1, 2. Everybody's off on 3. Right hand enters on beat 4. Next line. Both hands, 1, 2, and then 3 with the right hand. Both hands on 4. Rest on beat 1, and then 2, 3, 4. This is the tricky spot I mentioned earlier. Now, when you go super, super slow, which you need to do, it's actually not too hard. But this rhythm, this pattern comes out of nowhere. So let's break this down. Actually, I want to do it with the count. I haven't done any counting yet, and I said we're just focusing on coordination. But this is a particularly hard measure, so I do want to go ahead and look at that. So third line, first measure, both hands. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure everything enters on 4, both hands. Now, beat 1, you lift your left hand. You're still holding the right hand, so make sure you get that far first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and then 2, 3. So your right hand comes off on 3, which is that G in the left hand. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and. And I'll go ahead and throw in 4 and, not when I'm doing the other notes, the quarter notes and half notes, but when I do the eighth notes. So just to review, you remember I was saying at the beginning of the lesson, you don't have to do the ands for everything. But at this point, you should be able to know how to throw in the eighth notes correctly. And if we are counting, this is how I would do it. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3. So you see how that fits? We've played these eighth notes enough in the lesson. You're kind of already hearing how it goes in comparison to the surrounding quarter notes. But I will say the 4 and, I will divide up that beat right on the eighth notes, and then I'll just go back to 1, 2. Just make sure you don't go 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. See what I did? 4 and 1, 2. No, it's 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. Got it? And that's really all I'm going to do with that, because, like I said, it's pretty basic otherwise throughout this lesson with the eighth notes. So once again, back at the beginning of that third line, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that we're doing it slowly, and it may not feel difficult at this point. It's just when I played this piece fast earlier, and I'll play it faster, of course, at the end of the lesson. That just threw me off right there. So if that happens to you, you may have to go back and review it slower. If it doesn't happen to you, great. If it just happened to me, that's fine. But that rhythm just came out of nowhere, specifically in the second measure. It's just a challenging combination of rests and holds and when to play and when not to play, and then those eighth notes sneak in. Yeah, there's a lot going on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. So both hands on third measure, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So the last two measures is pretty basic. The left hand enters on beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, and again 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the bottom line, you've got the rest in the right hand. So the left hand comes in on 1, 2, 3, 4, and then both hands 1, 2, 3, 4. Third measure, excuse me. Right hand enters 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now don't rush because you've got staccato. Don't go. So you still got to count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then you're off. Once you hit the last one, you don't have to count anymore. Okay, so now that we put the hands together, you can see how, like most pieces, but you can see now this one's becoming a lot more challenging, even at the slow speed. And again, what makes it challenging, I think, is the coordination, not going through the rests. There's a lot of rests here in both hands. And at the same time, there's some holds, especially on 107. You've got these ties. And while you're holding the right hand and it's tied, your left hand enters. And then sometimes your left hand's still playing and your right hand comes off that tie, like in measure 2 at the top line of page 107. So right here, you got to know to get off that right hand on beat 3. And then get off the left hand for the right hand on beat 4, and then both hands. So that's a good example of something that probably can easily get overlooked. And just maybe the rests are ignored and then it becomes easier. But see, you're missing the style of the piece when you do that. Okay, so now I want to go through and do it a little bit faster and start to put in the counting a little bit more. Now the counting, I want to do that with you. I haven't done as much counting lately where I haven't played through the whole piece. A lot of times these pieces are just so long. But at the same time, you've done counting enough that you should be kind of familiar with it. And I certainly go through and break down, like I did earlier, page 107, the third line. I break down the tougher spots. But I do want to do it a little bit more in this lesson because I want to start to emphasize and get used to counting without having to break down ands when you don't have that many eighth notes, right? So let's start at the beginning. We got our hand position here. So this is a great opportunity to give a count off of 1, 2, 3, and then you're coming in on beat 4. So that kind of makes that set up pretty nicely. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So now that we've played it a little bit faster, you got a taste for it. I would say it is pretty challenging because I missed a few things. There was a rest or two that I blew right through. And even though I got it, with the counting and trying to observe the rests and all, this finger change here in the right hand at the second line, second measure, kind of sneaks up on you. It's a little tricky to do. So you may have to put some extra work into that, really get used to that. The other thing I thought of is because in my head, I wanted to keep counting the ands. Now, by no means are you not allowed to count this with the ands. You can do it. And if it's easier for you, go ahead and do it. It just depends. Some people are going to be like, I really need to break that down. And if you're that kind of person who likes to take the time, break things down, be exact, go for it. There's another bunch of people who are very different and say, look, I don't want the tedious, I understand how it works, give me, the shorter picture. And that's just where 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, where that falls in. But I did find myself wanting to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. And see what I did there? As soon as I said 4 and on the eighth notes, then I wanted to keep doing the ands. And like I said, if that happens to you, that's fine. Just don't lose your big beat. Like I said, don't go 4 and 1, 2, 3. Don't make eighth notes the same value as quarter notes and vice versa. And I think when you take a step back and you look at the bigger picture, I think that's going to be pretty obvious and pretty clear. And if you have to, there's 1, 2, 3. I think I only see 4 sets of eighth notes in the whole piece. Page 106, the first full measure and the last full measure on the top line. And then the bottom line, first measure. Page 107, third line, second measure. And I think that's it. So you could just circle those. So because everything else in the piece is quarter notes or larger. You could just circle those and just say, when I get there, play them twice as fast. So, but I want it to be in the pocket. I don't want it to be twice as fast like this. That wasn't the right rhythm. It was faster, but see, I held the second eighth note longer. So they got to be even. And it can't be... That was way too fast, right? So you see what I'm saying? It's still got to be in the pocket. And that's why I still suggest you count, whether it's 1 and 2 and or just 1, 2, and then fill it in. Let's see. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to play through the second ending. So let's pretend we just repeated. So I'm going to start here, first full measure. I'm going to go to the second ending. So little count off, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So I will say that third line is tricky. When you start getting a little bit faster like we did, it just all kind of sneaks up on you. So going right into that second ending from the second line, right here in the second ending, you got C chord to D chord. That's the first time we switch those chords that quickly. And then you've got your pedal coming in, of course, this B flat chord, and then the C chord, and then the D minor, but then you got this low D, and when you hit that D, you got to be off the pedal and off on the right hand, and then you're back to the right hand, you're off the left hand, and then you got to jump back on the bottom line. So there's a lot going on there, and the simple solution is, just keep practicing it very, very slowly, measure at a time, making connections, like making this connection. Now, one option I just thought of is your fourth finger's on D. If it makes sense to go to 4 on D here, go for it. You're coming back to 4 on D anyway. So if going to 5 throws you off, you can certainly do this. But if it just throws you off, I can see how going from a 4 here to a 4 there makes more sense. It's almost like a locked position. You're moving your arm and you're not moving your fingers, right? Here, you've got to switch fingers. So I give you the option. But I do kind of like that feel. Once I started playing it a little bit faster, I just naturally went to that 4. So let's continue. The bottom line, page 106. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So I'll stop right there because, again, this is the only other spot in the piece we have that pedal. Now, it's not a complicated pedal, but because we haven't been pedaling hardly at all, it sneaks up on you. And it is right there on the second line. So you could write a note at the top of 107 at the end of the first line, say, prepare pedal. And then when you get to that last measure on the second line, remember, you're off the pedal, off everything on beat 3. So the last two measures of the second line are this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, off, and then the right hand comes in by itself. And the next line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then you're off. And I think the hardest thing about the last like 2.5 lines of the piece is, your right hands are, your left hand's hardly playing. It's holding long chords. The hardest thing about it is just navigating across the keys. So you got this big jump in the right hand, 2 on G. And then the bottom line, 4 to the D. And then you got that thumb going down to the A. So you got a lot of movement on the keyboard. Not as much rhythm, thankfully, but certainly you're going to stay busy just, learning the movement. So again, if you have to break it down and practice, jumping. So third line, third measure, you're 5 on A, you're going to 2 on G. So you may have to practice that little jump several times. Okay, so we're getting close to finishing it up now. We went through the pedal already, which is very little of. The last thing is just dynamics and expression. We talked about the slurs, and pretty much the entire right hand of this piece is smooth. Now, I don't find this song, from what I know of it, to be a very smooth piece, but I guess I'd have to listen to it again. But that's okay. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, it's a peppy, upbeat song, right? So if it's not perfectly smooth in the right hand, don't overthink the smoothness of this piece, is essentially what I'm saying. Make it smooth, yes, not choppy, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be overly smooth, I think. That's just my opinion. It starts out mezzo forte, and it pretty much stays loud the whole time because, again, it's a fun, fast-paced, energized type of song. When it gets to the second ending on the third line of page 106, then you're at a forte. And it makes sense there because you're playing strong chords, you got pedal, it's meant to be louder there. And then you're backing off just a little bit back to mezzo forte. And at the end of the song, page 107, third line, last measure, this grows. And then forte. And we talked about the sharp. So there's not a whole lot of contrast in the piece. What's going to make the piece fun, but also hard, is if you get it up to speed. I'll leave that up to you. But that's it. We basically covered everything. So I'm going to play it for you now up to speed. Do my best of, not messing up fingering or going through the rests. I might do that once or twice. But it'll just prove to you that, it's not the easiest of pieces, especially getting it up to speed. So I'll give us a little count off and then I'll just go. So 1, 2, 3. And there it is. So yeah, it's a fun piece. It's going to be tough though. It's going to be tough. I had to definitely be focused all in when I was playing it at that speed. Granted, I haven't really practiced it that much, but you know, after my years of playing, I should be able to just sight read this thing for the most part without sweat. But that being said, still a hard piece. And when I got to the third line of page 107, I really had to think about that. At the fast speed, that something about that just really sneaks up on me. Yeah, so I started having to, once I got it, I stopped counting and I started thinking about the feel there. Like this left hand beats 2 and 3 of the second measure, sort of answering that right there in the right hand. See how that works? And when I started getting into that feel finally, then that became a little bit easier. I could finally start feeling it. But I couldn't feel it until I, broke it down and counted it and went through it like we did in the lesson. So any questions, any comments, anything at all, please let me know as always. I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for taking the time. I really enjoy doing these lessons. I'm looking forward to our next 2 lessons, which are going to be the last piece in our book, the Chattanooga Choo Choo. Tough piece. Mainly it's just a long piece, and that's why I'm going to break it down into 2 separate lessons. But I'm looking forward to that, and then you get to graduate from book number 1, and off we go to book number 2. Check out the supplement book, the Alfred's Greatest Hits Level 1. At this point, if you haven't started that book, you might want to start it. You're definitely at the level now you can start that book and then some. You might even be able to, skip the first couple songs in there, which the first couple pages aren't that great, but once you get into that book, there's some nice arrangements there as well. I haven't finished that book. I just did Rockin' Around the Clock and posted that a few days ago. So I'm only about halfway through that book. That's a tough piece too, but like Ballad of Gilligan's Isle, it's a fast piece, different style, classic rock, but fun piece. So yeah, check that out on the channel if you get a chance. And I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.